Hi, it's me, Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and join me at Patreon. Link in the description. Suddenly, several people began to clap politely, which spread to include even many of those students who had been unkind to her in the past. Suddenly, she felt Victoria's lips on her cheek and then near her ear, as the older girl placed her hand on the middle of her back. "Go down and say thank you, princess." And with a gentle push, she found herself drifting down the stairs into the middle of all her friends. Looking back at that night, the only thing she might have changed was that she would have wanted to dance with Victoria more. It seemed that she had to dance with everyone there at least once, including Coach Thompson and even the headmaster, who both requested a waltz. When the dancing paused to announce the king and queen, she tried to head for the girls' room, but they held her in place. To her relief, they did not announce her name as the queen. She was still confused when they came to pull her up to the small stage amid loud applause, until she realized that the name they had announced had been Joan Lilly. The only disappointed face in the whole crowd was that of Freddie the quarterback, who, to the amusement of all, tore up his own invitation and threw it on the floor. The next announcement took most by surprise, even though most had voted for him. The boy chosen as the king came willingly to the stage. Apart from his feathers for which he eschewed the crown, he looked quite dashing in his tuxedo and ceremonial headdress. His acceptance speech was 4 simple words. "Did you hear thunder?" "Thank you, Dean," Emily said, and kissed his lips gently in gratitude and to everyone's approval. "You're welcome, Emily." "You're amazing," he whispered back as she hugged him. It wasn't the loudest applause of the night, however. That round of applause came later, when, toward the end of the evening, from a dark corner of the hall, everyone heard Emily squeal loudly, "Yes, Victoria." "I will," as Victoria slipped the ring that had been her grandmother's onto Emily's finger. "Everyone here knows that the woman we are gathered to honor is an eminently deserving candidate. This year's award for humanitarian efforts within the medical community was made more remarkable by the fact that this has been the most successful and hopeful year we have ever had. What is more, it is a crowning achievement, as each of the last 5 years has each been more successful than the last." He looked over at Emily and smiled warmly. "So, when I was asked by the Secretary General to present this medal for him, because he was called back to Africa, I was pleased to do it. Now, it is traditional to recount the highlights of our honoree's achievements at this time, but we have been asked most graciously to skip this step by our honoree. So, in deference to her gentle good nature and her humility, we will. You've all been reading about them for years anyway. Instead, I have asked a longtime friend and the current commander of our Central African Peacekeeping Force, General Roger Sloan, to speak." Emily couldn't move. She sat at her table right before the stage, frozen in place with her hands clasped at her upper part, while Victoria gently massaged her shoulders. She could feel it coming, and once again, try as she might, she could not do anything about it. As the applause died, the large man on the podium spoke. "You all know that I'm not one for speeches." A chuckle ran through the crowd at the obvious joke. "Even so, this is one subject about which I could speak all night. If I were ever to try to tell you of all the many ways my dear friend Emily has shown how much she deserves an award for her endless love and for her boundless humanity, we'd never get to eat." The crowd chuckled and applauded politely. So instead, I thought I'd tell a very short story of how we met. Now I know many in this room have heard all or a part of the story before, but I think it's worth repeating. He paused to look at the crowd. I was, as is a habit of mine, injured. The crowd responded again, with laughter and applause. The general was wearing a sling on one arm and a new decoration for personal valor stemming from several weeks before when he rushed into a burning Humvee to pull one of his men out alive after one of his escort vehicles had hit a mine. Not his first award or injury received in that fashion. Although, this time it was for nothing quite so noble. I had been showing off. He let the crowd chuckle once more. I was laying on the ground, with my eyes closed, when all of a sudden I felt this little warm hand on my forehead and heard a very sweet voice telling me that I would be okay. The emotion in the big man's voice was unmistakable. I have to tell you that for a moment, I was surprised. I thought it was a miracle. There was some scattered but soft applause, and a few laughed along with him. Then I opened my eyes and found out that I was right. He paused again to seemingly collect his thoughts. I also remember that on the occasion described, an older but not wiser student made several incorrect comments to our Emily for trying to help when everyone else just stood by. Most of what that boy said that day was completely wrong and does not bear remembering. I say most, because he did call her special. That has always stayed with me, because for all his errors, he got that one spectacularly correct. In the intervening 45-odd years, I have never found a better description of Emily. For all those years, this woman has been thanking me for coming to her rescue. Most recently during our intervention in the subcontinent. Everyone laughed along. Don't get me wrong, I would have done that for her alone, but this time there were other justifications, as you are all aware. More laughter. What she has never understood at all is how many times she has come to my rescue. When my Mary passed, when the plague surfaced in Calcutta, and when insurgents burned the food for the refugees in Uganda. Every time she ever told me it would be okay, it was. So you see, I am only the spokesperson, elected from amongst her many friends and admirers, almost all of whom share those same common experiences of her selfless love and the same sense of appreciation for her boundless humanity. Then, turning away from the crowd at large and directly to Emily, he added, over the years, Emily, your compassion for everyone around you, as well as those you have never met, your love, and your gentle wisdom have saved me countless times. From that first time, every time you told me it would be all right, it always was. I doubt if one of us can tell you what something like that really means, least of all me. Not one in a million could even try. All I can do is to stand here and tell you how much you have enriched all our lives, and how much I personally love you. You do know that, don't you, Emily? Emily nodded at him through the tears that filled her eyes, which caused the whole crowd to go, ah, which in turn caused them all, even Emily, to chuckle affectionately. Oh, and I guess we also can give you this little medal from the secretary to add his small thanks to our own, Roger finished. Amid the applause, Emily was able to stand and thank everyone with her ever-gracious smile and bows, but in the end, Roger brought the medal to her and placed it around her neck, even as she placed her arms around his. Comfortable? Victoria asked. Very, Emily answered. It was late in the season and cool, but they had the windows open so that they could listen to the late-night sounds of the creatures with which they shared this end of the lake. The fire was warm, but Victoria covered Emily with a quilt anyway. That feels good on my legs. Love, it's nice and warm from the fire, Emily sighed with pleasure. Victoria just smiled that she knew. Dinner was delicious again too, and I'm feeling nicely stuffed. Thank you, honey. You're welcome, dear. Victoria paused just to watch the way the reflections of the fire sparkled in Emily's eyes some more. Victor called while you were in the bathroom, Victoria finally said, and only because it would make her beloved so happy. Emily's eyes shifted to her expectantly. Victoria smiled. He's coming and should be here late the day after tomorrow. He told me that Marie decided that she could come after all and that she's bringing the kids. Emily visibly perked up at the good news. That's wonderful. I'm so glad she decided to come. I was disappointed that he wasn't going to be able to get away until next week. What changed? Well, it seems that the new chief resident at Chicago's Mercy Hospital has some latitude on when he decides to get away. Emily laughed, and it was still the most wonderful sound in the world to Victoria, even after all their years together. They gave him the job? That's wonderful, Vic. When did you find out? Tonight, dear. He called us about 10 minutes after he got the news, she grinned. I'm so happy for him, Emily said, reaching for Victoria's hand. And I'm so proud of him too. I always have been, but he really seems to be doing very well for himself these last few years. You were a good parent, Victoria. Emily grinned some more, because it was an old and cherished joke between them that stemmed from those times when things had not been smooth, as they sometimes are when you are raising kids. And you made a good mother, my love, Victoria chuckled back. But all of them are doing very well. Thank goodness that's one worry we don't have. I'm proud of all three of them, and the grandkids too. Emily tugged her hand a little. Let's open a bottle of wine, Vic. I'd love a good bottle of wine to celebrate our good parenting. Emily, dear, you know the doctor said you should avoid any alcohol, Victoria said, her face suddenly sad and worried. Victoria, dear. It doesn't really matter, does it? She said as gently as she could. No, sweetheart, I guess it really doesn't. Victoria's eyes still looked sad, but she smiled for Emily anyway. Red or white, sweetheart? Do you remember that bottle of red that we bought in Paris on our 5th anniversary? Emily giggled. You mean the one we drank on our 6th anniversary? Victoria giggled right back. No, not that one. I mean the expensive one we put aside. Emily still smiled. Oh, that one. Victoria shook her head a little. We drank that one the next night, baby. Oh, for goodness sake. Victoria, you do know the one I'm talking about. It was the one you bought saying it would be a good investment, when you had the idea of building up a really first-class wine cellar. Yes. I remember the one. That was the one I was carrying when we had that party on the old, out-of-service, Concorde aircraft they had in Paris. Victoria laughed out loud. That was nice of them to let us on board for a glass of champagne with our friends. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.